one of the things that tore Arizona apart and tore other parts of our country apart was because people did not have all the information. So when they gave the information only to the cyber ninjas, and the cyber ninjas decided to interpret it this way or the other way and make all these allegations and assertions, there was no way that the public could check that. They had to decide for themselves, who were they going to trust? Who were they going to believe? When everybody has the information, then those false claims cannot stick. And I feel badly that it has been a toxic environment in Arizona. I have such praise for Senator Bennett because he is so courteous to everyone and so respectful and really listens to people. And I know that goes a long way there because a lot of people are not doing that. The thing that's actually preventing the Democrats from supporting this is this fear that somehow these records are going to be used to further false election claims, but they're not, because everybody will be able to say, no, you're wrong. I see it also. Right. And so this is the protection, not the slippery slope. If they end up not releasing the information to everyone, they're going to be filled with false election claims again.
Senator Birch.
Thank you. I rise to explain my vote. After much deliberation, I think that it came down to a few things for me. I am deeply concerned, like many of my colleagues, about the elections conspiracies that run rampant, and I think that they are baseless and unhelpful. Individuals bringing ridiculous lawsuits. And one of the problems that these individuals have is that there's never any evidence. And I know that in my district, when I'm knocking doors, thousands of doors, I'm hearing from people about transparency in our government. And I don't want there to be any confusion that my yes vote on this piece of legislation has anything to do with my concerns about the integrity of our elections, because that's not what this is about. But I do hear the concerns of individuals in my district about the government, how we operate, and our transparency. And I think that this is the way that my district would want me to vote, and I'm going to vote with my district, and that's why I voted yes today.
Senator Gonzalez.
Thank you. I rise to explain my vote. As most of you know, I sat on the elections committee all of last session and heard everything about what supposedly went wrong in the election of 2020. On this particular bill, I am going to side with my colleague on the other side, Senator Bennett, and I'm going to vote yes because I think he's right. You know, Fontes also agrees with this. And a very special constituent in my district, Bill Risner, very much supports this bill. He's an attorney in Tucson, civil rights attorney, very well noted in Tucson, has been working on this for years and years. He assured me that this would be a way for nobody to be able to say, well, like all of the things that I heard in last session's election committee would not happen. He said that he even did this in the Democratic State Party years ago. He's been trying to get our party to do this for years, so that what happened in 2020 cannot happen again. We cannot allow that to happen again. And so my vote is for Bill Risner, my constituent who has been working on this issue for many, many years. And so I vote aye.
Senator Miranda.
This is more of a symbolic vote here. I'm rising to support my Democratic Secretary of State. I just want to show support. Out of all the election bills, this is the only one that he supported. So I'm with our Secretary of State. So with that, I vote yes.
Oh, go ahead, yeah, please. You're live. You gotta change yours. Yeah.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
They can't hear you. You gotta speak loud.
My name is Brandon Slayton. I'm the chairman of the Maricopa County Libertarian Party. As chair, I was given a crash course in our elections. as the various political party chairmen play important roles in oversight. With this knowledge from my involvement in the 2020, the 2021 Senate audit, and the 2022 election, it is my great privilege to welcome you to tonight's Tripartisan Election Integrity Forum, an event that reflects our shared commitment to transparent elections. We are gathered here as representatives of diverse political ideologies and as citizens who deeply care about the health and integrity of our democracy. Among us are key figures like Republican Senator Ken Bennett and Democrat Bill Risner, who have been instrumental in shaping Arizona's electoral landscape. Our focus tonight, Trust in Elections, unpacking the influence of ballot image, CVR, and party cooperation, addresses an issue that is as timely as it is critical. In recent years, general faith in the electoral process has been challenged. Accusations of fraudulent practices and the resulting public concern call for a clear, open, and truthful discussion on the solution. As we will hear, ballot images are part of the solution. In the absence of such verifiable, transparent tools, our belief in the election's outcome boils down to an act of faith. Without the means to verify election results, we are simply taking the government's word for it. And this is not sustainable, especially not in this era of divisive politics. Tonight is not about partisan politics. It's about working together beyond party lines. It's about transparency, collaboration, and most importantly, action. Our shared objective is to ensure that the voice of every Arizonan is heard, counted accurately, and validated, not just accepted on faith, and that the public can confirm the results themselves. And now, it is my pleasure to introduce our next speaker, a remarkable individual who has dedicated her career to both the arts and social activism. She is a familiar face on our TV screens, but she's also a passionate champion for election integrity. Please welcome Mimi Kennedy, whose diverse career ranges from acting to activism, has been an eloquent and effective voice for change, using her platform to highlight critical issues and inspire action. Tonight, she brings her commitment for election integrity to Arizona, sharing her insights gained from years of advocacy. We're fortunate to have her experience and passion as part of our conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Mimi Kennedy. And just a quick note, we will be taking questions, but they'll be at the end of tonight's forum. Thank you.
Thank you. I hope you can all hear me. All right. I think that's the first time I've been introduced by a libertarian, and I'm honored. I'm really thrilled. Yes, this is tripartisan and civics. We all live in this country, and we need our elections to be honest. But thank you so much. That was a first for me, and I'm really happy about it. I'm going to read what I have because I have so much to say on the subject. I don't want to just spin out. First of all, in the interests of transparency, people always wonder, I am a progressive Democrat, but I'm a Kennedy. Am I a Democrat? Am I a Kennedy? No, my father was a Republican lawyer in upstate New York. And when JFK met him, when JFK was a congressman in 1952, he said, "Get in here. I can't believe there's such a thing as a Republican Kennedy." And they discovered, looking at a map of Ireland, that our families were from adjacent counties. I think my great-grandfather, when he heard there was a Republican Party in the 19th century, knew Lincoln had freed the slaves, and he also believed in an Irish Republic, the country had left behind. I met John Brakey at the Arizona Democratic Convention in the mid-2000s. I had been asked to be on the advisory board, to be chair of it, of Progressive Democrats of America, which was a new movement inside the Democratic Party. And believe me, a lot of the Democratic Party wanted us to go away. But it was a successful movement. And we began with opposition to the war in Iraq. We wanted to bring the peace movement inside the party. But very quickly, we realized that election problems were ruining the people's voice. And we realized that the all digital voting machines that had been sold to Americans in 2002 with the Help America Vote Act were ending paper ballots in many places. It was what the computer said, and that was that. They'd been sold to many Democrats, many of our allies, as something that would end long lines, enfranchise more people, and give all communities the latest in technology and serve them well. We know what happened. So PDA, under my insistence, often went on the hustings to restore the paper ballot. So when I met John, what I loved was he knew the work I'd been doing in California. LA County, the only thing bigger than Maricopa County, was on its way to getting all debold machines. And our county clerk had said, I will never count those curly little papers. I'm just not going to do it. So we had to get rid of those machines. Now, even the mention of the name debold, now it just starts to spark all the stuff that the Stop the Steal movement has been talking about. And it's very hard to be an election protection or election integrity or whatever we can call ourselves now that hasn't been co-opted, to be an activist. Now, my friends and family who only remember me crying election fraud think those people have something to do with me. And I wish the media would be more clear about the fact that I was calling stolen election frauds when there were no paper ballots in most cases to count, or there were paper ballots and no one would count them. Now, those things have been mitigated somewhat. We've restored more paper ballots, and many more people are aware of the need to prove an election is real. So here comes John Brakey with what I think is the most elegant solution to the existing conspiracy theories, I'm doing air quotes, and concerns, honest concerns about fraudulent elections. If our paper ballots are scanned, which they are in almost every case for the count, those scanners are taking pictures of the ballots. Why haven't those pictures been preserved? They must be preserved as election records. Part of John's work was to get Attorney Chris Sauter to get a ruling from the Justice Department, very little known as far as I know, but Audit Arizona knows about it, that said, yeah, digital records now are also the election records that must be preserved for 22 months. However, that's been ignored because, of course, the law was written before digital records, so people say it's unclear. However, very clear to us, very clear to John, to legislators like Jamie Raskin, to legislators in Arizona. I want to thank those 3 Democrats who voted for the bill as it was. But I want to address some concerns. In the bill that Katie Hobbs vetoed, there were 2 provisions that talked about making the voter records, which has the voter's name and address, accessible as public records. Now, I know this raises alarms. Of course it does. In our era of voter intimidation, we've seen the people standing by the drop boxes. So those provisions are being taken out. I think people might not quite understand that those voter lists with the names and addresses have been given out to me to get out the vote, have been given out to the political parties. You have to pay and you have to register saying you're getting them, have been posted in LA. It was absolute law in LA County. You had to post on the door of the polling place all the voters in the precinct, their names and addresses, so that to get out the vote, people could see who hadn't voted and go and encourage them to vote. So those things have been accessible, but I totally understood this idea that it would go online and everybody would know voters' names and addresses. That was scary and justifiably so. So in the next bill, it's down to the ballot images preserved as public records and made public, along with the cast vote record, which is what the scanners made of all the votes on the picture of the ballot. That's what the election office uses to count up and give us the results. So those will be made to the public. It is transparency. It's an elegant solution, and he's been on it for a long time. So that's why I'm here tonight. I want to make sure that the Democratic Party doesn't end up in a backwater on the wrong side of history, because I saw it happen in 2002. And they brought us electronic voting machines without even really knowing what had happened. One of the first things that happened was Max Cleland's election went very awry in Georgia, totally flipped. And he, who was a great hero, lost. And there was not a shred of paper to look at and see if what had really happened. So I want to thank everybody here. I want to remember that we are incrementally going towards transparent, trackable elections. And ballot tracking, by the way, is about the envelope, and it's actually an improvement because I can find out when my absentee ballot mail was counted, came into the office. That's the tracking. It has nothing to do with what happens to that ballot once it's out of that envelope. And now to Bill Risner. He is from Kentucky. Okay, that could have fooled me. His father, I talked to him yesterday. His father was a Roosevelt Democrat, and the family came to Arizona in 51, as so many people did, because a family member had asthma, and the good Arizona air was going to clear that up. You know him better than I, you in Arizona, as a fierce fighter against corruption. He's been a criminal lawyer. He's done civil cases. He's done great environmental cases. I have watched people thank him online at many events. I first saw him in action in the video of John's fight for records in Pima County during the RTA election that they thought had gone awry. And that case went through permutations that were Alice through the looking glass. Bill described it finally as ending up a judge saying, you can't get the evidence you need without the evidence you need to prove to me that you need this evidence. So that was a catch-22. And no one was held accountable, although eventually it was ruled that that election was fraudulent, but protocols had been changed by then. And so no one was held accountable. It was just, well, we've changed procedures, so that's okay. Although it was called an incident of historic wrongdoing. Breaky Risner's efforts just keep going on. And I do think they have the solution to our political violence, our political paranoia around elections. Bill told me that he started out as an activist against the Vietnam War in college, as did I. He also said he studied theater in high school. And I just want to say, I'm glad he became a lawyer instead, because as reporter Loretta Honeycutt said in a 2014 article in the Arizona Independent News Network, guys like Bill Risner don't divide and conquer, they uncover. That is true. Whereas I once heard Sean Penn say, at least when we're acting, we know we're lying. Yeah. So, transparently, you say I'm becoming someone else, but I'm really glad Bill is a lawyer and being himself. He also joked to me that I could introduce him as not just another pretty face, but beauty is as beauty does. And in that case, I would introduce Bill Risner as a knockout. Here he is. I can't hear him, though.
Okay, we're on. Bill?
Yeah, thanks,
Can you
Mimi.
hear? Sound check on the other end?
I don't know, can you?
Did you hear? Are you hearing him? Hello?
Yes, we hear. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, thanks. That RTA case he mentioned, I ended up representing.
Okay, can you get the other mic, John, the handheld?
I'm sorry, come up front if you can. I'm sorry. Yeah, maybe we can move the mic. Well, it's pretty close to him right now, but we could also, where's the other mic? Okay.
Yeah, okay. My voice is, I'm getting older.
Yeah, it's not our system. It's the TV's as loud as it will go, and it's his voice. But they're getting a good recording on the other end, and I would suggest moving closer. We got a couple of chairs here. Okay, go ahead, Bill. Let's continue.
Okay. Look, I mentioned just a minute ago, it struck me with the Libertarian Party that ended up with the RTA case trying to get the judge to make changes so they couldn't cheat anymore, and ended up representing the Libertarian Party. It was an interesting case in that we're first in front of a judge, and the judge ruling, Michael Harrington, his ruling was you can't come to court just because an election's fraudulent. One of the things that I've learned is that you have to have procedures in advance to make sure that the election runs properly, to make sure that it's verifiable, because there is really nothing that you can do afterwards. That's it. You've got to have procedures, you've got to know, but the courts, everybody clams up, and there's no way to prove later on that that's the case. Now, the problem in Arizona today is that there is no way to contest any election. There was one way that the legislature passed, that Governor Hobbs vetoed. So the situation with her veto in the pocket is that there is no way to contest any election. So why is that the case? That's the case because an election contest must be filed within 5 days. And the election contest must give the specifics as to how the election was rigged or what the illegality was. But in 5 days, well, you can't get the ballots, the paper ballots. You can never get the paper ballots. They're put away in a box under the current system. So if you can't get the paper ballots, what can you use as proof? That's it. It can't be done. And under Arizona law, there are no recounts. No recounts. If you pay to have a recount under Arizona law, you can't do it because we don't have recounts. We have something called an automatic recount, which I think now may take a half of 1%, but and then the automatic recount must be on a machine and they use the same machines that counted it the first time. Yeah, Republicans, at least in Phoenix, may remember, it's a little diverted. There was an election, I think about 2000, anyway, 15, 20 years ago. District 20, Republican primary. One candidate, a guy named Anton Orlick, 4 votes ahead to be a representative. That came within the narrow automatic recount. They recounted it. Anton lost. And the other guy had 14 more votes. That happens, but it was kind of interesting because there's something like 20,000 votes in that district. The election director in Maricopa County said, hey, let's just have a hand count. Boom. The people running for office agreed. Jan Brewer, who was Secretary of State, sent a memo over, said, absolutely not. You're not allowed to do a hand count in Arizona. You have to run them through the machine again. So that switch in votes was kind of interesting, but what really caught people's attention was that that second time they counted 486 votes that weren't counted the first time. So then He said, whoa, let's find out what happened. They subpoenaed the person from the company. That person wouldn't honor the subpoena, come in. The judge had to tell the candidate, look, nothing I can do about it. Arizona law says I must accept what this machine says. And that's the end of it. Sorry, Mr. Orlick, you won't be going to the legislature. Still, we wanted to know, there was testimony by the election director in Maricopa County who testified that there was an 18% error rate on one machine, and she said under oath that was within the expected margin. That was acceptable. So what happened? People still wondered what happened with those ballots. So Jack Harper, who was a senator in the state at that time, was the head of the Senate Election Committee. He subpoenaed the ballots. They wanted to find out what was going on with these ballots. No. When it just came time to him to get it, the FBI swooped in, took the ballots, they kept them for 3 years and later burned them. So nobody ever knows what happened. You can't get those paper ballots. So anyway, the governor, when she vetoed this bill, which is the only way to know what happened, she said that it threatened anonymity and privacy, which, on the face of it is absurd. Because when you put a ballot in, you don't sign your name. Your ballot looks like other ballots, unless you've got some special way to do an oval. It's totally absurd. So she gives an absurd reason, and then says it opens the door to additional election disinformation. But not being able to show anything, not being able to look at the images is that's what opens the door. So the one bill that shut the door, she vetoed, and hopefully they can come up with some language change, and they'll get more Democrats to vote for it. It's startling for me, as someone who has represented the Democratic Party in Pima County on several lawsuits, the fact that we didn't get one vote from any Democrat in Pima County. But I think that's related to some internal things. You don't hear our bills, we won't hear yours. Well, that's a fine thing, except that we're talking about democracy and votes, and people must choose which side they're on. And one of the things I wanted to talk about, and I may get this stuff in the wrong order, but one thing I wanted to look at was what was the history in Arizona of ballots, and what does our Constitution say about it? So I have an exhibit. It's listed as number 2, and I think it may be able to be shown.
There it is.
So first of all, we've got 2 main sections in the Arizona Constitution. One talks about the method of voting secrecy. And it's important to look at the words here, because words matter. And it says, all elections of the people shall be by ballot and by such other method as be prescribed by law, provided that secrecy in voting shall be preserved. And that's not counting, that's voting. And that was the process in Arizona from the earliest time. You vote, you put it in, and it's always been anonymous, and it is today. The next section, 7, was kind of interesting. It says, in all elections held by the people in this state. So that's important, because the government doesn't hold elections. The legislature writes the rules, but the people hold elections, and they truly do. I remember a few years ago in Pima County, something like 1,500 people would help out at the polls. And you go in and you sign your name on the poll list, you know who the voters are and so forth. But it's the people. It's not like government's doing us a favor. And the key to democracy is whoever gets the most votes wins. And that means you need an honest count of the votes. There's a statute, and it's Exhibit 3, that's kind of interesting. I took this from the code in 1913. So this is right after we have this Constitution. This is the way votes were handled in Arizona. And it says, as soon as the polls are finally closed, the election board must immediately proceed to canvass the votes given at such election. Right there. The canvass must be public in the presence of bystanders and must be continued without adjournment until completed and the result thereof is declared. That statute in 1913 went through a number of changes and was 16601, was in Arizona law until 5 years ago when it was abandoned. The legislature took it out. What happened during the intervening time was that the technology changed in counting. That's really what we need to understand and roll back. I had as an exhibit 5A, I took some laws from 1956. Even in 1956, this is the way we did it. And what happens is that at the precincts, they removed, you go in and vote, you fold it up, you put it in the box, then they count the number of people that voted, then they count the ballots, then they open them up, then they, one person from each party is there, they look at it and he calls out audibly the who voted for who. So everybody knows. And then even bystanders, there's a rope, you can go in the back and say, I want to watch. Would you hold that up? They'll hold it for you. You can't touch them, but they're marking down and making a tally of who does it. So you know who the voters are, you know what the tally is. And then after they, each ballot is called out, they put a hole in it and they put them all on a string. And then at the end, they have a process for taking the strings and taking it in. So the key takeaway from this stuff is what audit has claimed a long time is voting is private. Counting is public. And we need to know. But then things changed. And where it really changed, I think, was in 1966 was kind of a interesting change. You always, early on, you had 20 days in our state history, 20 days to challenge and contest an election. 1966, they did two things. One, they switched to machines, and then they cut it to 5 days to challenge. So that's where we are now. But those machines have gone through varieties. You know, there were the machines where you take lift an arm and pull it down. Then we got punch cards. We had fun. Once I represented Spring, we recounted the Tucson election because the paper was bad on the punch cards. But then they went to the optical scanners, which is what they did in '66 when they changed the time within challenging. And those optical scanners were the kind where it would look and a certain part on the ballot, it would see if it was marked. And those were the things that were kind of infamous for cheating, because all that stuff, the paper goes through, the computer gives you a number, and you can have faith, maybe at church or something. But we've all learned in democracy, and I think historically There was some cheating allegations going on when Jefferson was running against Adams and Lincoln was involved with some stuff. It's been the history of this country, which is why everything was open and done the way we did it here. We learned those lessons over time. And what the ballot technology now does, it's miraculous because it's the high-speed scanner takes the ballot, picture on both sides. It's set up so it puts a number on it. The number relates to the batch, the way they store these things. When you think about Maricopa County with 2.1 million ballots, 1,600 boxes of these things, there's no way to know what goes on to a precinct. There's no way to do this kind of system without computers that are programmed to read them and do them. But you don't have to take on faith the answer, because you can have all of the images are available. They can be separated by computers, by precincts. There's no other way to get the precinct. One precinct, because they use voting centers now, you might have to go into 1,500 boxes to get a whole precinct. You simply can't do it. But you can know, and you can find out if with ballot images. And I wanted to mention that there's a problem because the election departments generally, well, a lot of them don't like it. Now, in Maricopa County, their election department, their contract with Dominion does permit precise knowledge, does permit it to even be posted online, and it certainly permits looking and examining it. Why, if after the Senate did their huge examination, hand count, blah, blah, and couldn't do the hand count, finally the Senate said, hey, give us a copy of those images. So they got a copy of the images. And then later, some guy working with the ninjas said, well, I couldn't tell if all of the things were there, and I wasn't sure about this and that. Meanwhile, the Maricopa County Election Department had made a second copy, and they said, look, here, everything he says isn't there, is there. This stuff really works well. We made, on behalf of audit, John Brakey filed a public records request asking for a copy of the images, but they wouldn't give him a copy of the images. And, we hung around for a while, and then eventually we had a court hearing. The court says, no, you can't get the hearing. It went to Court of Appeals. They says, no, you can't get the images. And we're now awaiting, we filed a petition with the Arizona Supreme Court. And what that laws and case relates to is Exhibit 7. Once Audit filed a lawsuit, it was behind a lawsuit in Tucson to require them to save the images. What they were doing, and some other counties I think are still doing it, is they take these images and they say, oh, here are the numbers, but they destroy the images. And so you can't count them twice. So this law was passed and the senator that introduced it said the point of it is to make sure that the original database is protected. And so that would permit Maricopa County Board of Supervisors to give copies. But they didn't want to give copies, and the court said, no, even though the statute says that you need to make sure they're protected, including unauthorized copy, you can't get it. We're in court now, and just show you the effect of the veto by Governor Hobbs. Santa Cruz County, this is nuts, but Santa Cruz County sued John Brakey and Audit in Pima County because he had made a public record request for the cast vote record. And the cast vote record is a spreadsheet that shows how the computer, how it was interpreted, where all the votes are. That's what's used. They said, no, that's secret, and you can't get it. So the judge dismissed the case, not on the merits, because what are you doing suing somebody who made a public record of Santa Cruz County, came to Pima to sue John? That's ridiculous. The day after Governor Hobbs vetoed this bill, I received a notice that Santa Cruz County had filed an appeal to the Court of Appeals. And what they're arguing is that all data from an election is secret. So we're facing a huge problem. The people in this state need to understand that, is that we as voters need to make sure and know that our elections are real. And there is a method. It's there. The contract with Dominion that Maricopa County had is public record. You know, I read the contract. It provides, they have a great system. It provides that this is available to the people. But the election department didn't want to do it. So we're at an interesting spot in this state now. Due to this veto, there's no way to challenge any election. And it's opened the door to crazy claims like Santa Cruz County that says you can't even get the cast vote record. You can't even know what we claim the votes were. So it's a situation where we all have to act together. And this, there's nothing partisan about anything except I'm a democracy partisan. And I have my own views on lots of stuff, but on counting, honest counting of votes, we're all in it together, I think. Thanks. I'm ready for questions.
Well, we're going to wait because you're going to introduce.
I went too
Ken
long.
Bennett.
Oh.
And then we're going to set up a panel and then ask questions.
Okay,
That's the next
good,
one.
good.
And so.
Well, Ken Bennett, I tell you, is an amazing guy that I've got to know. You know, he was president of the Senate. Interesting thing is when he was chosen by the Senate to be the person watching the hand count. So I think he probably learned a whole lot about how this works. And John Breaker was up watching, and together they learned a whole lot. So he's been a phenomenal advocate and really worked hard and worked hard with a whole bunch of other people that have been working on this issues that came up with a bill that they thought was a terrific bill. But fortunately, her veto was before a 30-day recess. So we have a chance for a second shot at it.
Thank you, Bill.
Good evening. This is Ken Bennett. I am honored to be with you tonight. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I appreciate Brandon and Mimi and Bill giving some perspectives about how to make our elections transparent, trackable, and publicly verified. Now, of course, I've been participating in elections as a voter since the late 70s. And I ran for the city council up in Prescott in 84, I think it was. I happened to be elected along with one other gentleman to the council that year. I was the top vote getter in the general election. There was one more seat. He won by 3 votes over the third place candidate. And that's kind of an example of how close elections can be. But I really became involved in elections when, rather unexpectedly, I was appointed by Jan Brewer, who had ascended to the governor's office after Janet Napolitano left. And Jan Brewer asked me to replace her as the Secretary of State. And I suddenly became the chief elections official in the state of Arizona. And I worked very hard to build good relationships with all 15 counties, about half of which are governed by the recorder or the boards of supervisors by Democrats, and about half of the counties are governed by Republicans. But that made no difference to me. I just wanted to make sure that we were doing elections correctly. And very quickly, and I know I think this is now our program and we're well into it and we want to have some questions if possible, but I can remember the very next year that after I'd become Secretary of State, I became in 2009, the very first statewide election we held in 2010. One of the ballot propositions on that election, after almost 2 million people voting in the state, it came back, it was losing by 126 votes. And my deputy secretary came in and told me that it was the first time at that point in the history of the state of Arizona that the state law was going to be triggered, that a statewide vote that was within less than 200 votes between the winner loser had to be automatic recounted, as Bill mentioned. It's now expressed as a percentage of the number of votes cast, but at that time, you didn't recount a statewide election unless it was less than 200 votes between the winner and loser. First time ever. And I was laying in bed that night thinking, okay, there was about 2 million votes. We got to get all these ballots out, run them through the machines again, and count them. If those machines are 99% accurate, 1% off, 1% of 2 million ballots is 20,000 ballots. This is a race decided by 126 votes. If they're 99.9% accurate, that's 2,000. Much larger than the difference. If it's 99.99% accurate, that's 200 votes in a race that was decided by 126. We could recount it the second time, and even if it was 99.99% accurate with the first count, it could go from losing by 126 votes to winning by 74 votes, a swing of 200 votes. That's when it really hit me in my head and heart how important it is to be precise in our elections, but not only that, to be transparent. So after being Secretary of State and going on to other things, when the audit of Maricopa County occurred in 2021, having been a Senate president and a legislator, and the Senate was asking for an audit, but also having been a Secretary of State, I offered to help if I could. And I was asked by the Senate to be the Senate liaison to the audit, to be their eyes and ears because they were in session. I asked several Democrats and eventually found John Brakey, who would serve as a co-liaison with me. I asked Brandon Slayton, the Libertarian chair, the chair of the Libertarian Party there in Maricopa County, to be because that's what we do in elections in Arizona. We get multi-parties involved as observers and volunteers. And that was a fascinating 6 or 8 months in that audit, with allegations going back and forth in all different ways. But as I thought about it after that, it all happened. Most of the questions or conspiracies or concerns about elections basically came down to 3 main categories. One was allegations that people that shouldn't have been voting were allowed to vote. Second was this allegation that there were unauthorized ballots that somehow got injected into the system and were counted as part of the process and therefore changed the outcome. And the third was that the machines had not counted the ballots accurately, and we ought to somehow verify that the count was accurate. So they did the big hand count and counted every. Anyway, after working through that issue and sitting down and having hundreds of conversations with John Brakey and many others, we came up with an idea that ended up being Senate Bill or House Bill 2560. That's the bill that unfortunately the governor vetoed. It said that when counties conduct these elections, they will produce 4 pieces of public information. The first 2 are already public information, but it would be a list of who was eligible to vote. Actually, before the election, that would be released. That's already public information. After the election, 3 more pieces of information, a list of who voted, so that you could tell that everybody on the voted list was on the eligible to vote list. Third was going to be release the images of the ballots that the machines take a picture of as those ballots go through. That would allow us to verify that we have the same number of ballots as we had the same number of voters, that there weren't any additional ballots injected into the system. And fourth was the release of the cast vote record. The cast vote record is essentially a spreadsheet. And the votes on a particular ballot are recorded on a row on that spreadsheet. So if you have the ballot images of ballot number 692 or whatever ballot you want to look at, you can see that there's a vote for Smith and Jones and Garcia and whatever races they're running in. You can now go to row 692 of that cast vote record and see that the system recorded a vote for Smith and Jones and Garcia. Then you can add up the columns of that cast vote record spreadsheet and see that the totals that each candidate received is what the county told us in the canvas, the certification of the election. That's what each candidate received. Now, as was alluded to by Mimi, I think, or maybe Bill, it created concern that these voter lists and the ballot images might allow people to reverse engineer somehow how any particular voter voted. Even though that's not the case, I believe that was the main reason why the governor vetoed the bill at the request of some organizations who had that fear. And so we're going to bring back the third and fourth aspects of the bill, just releasing the anonymous ballot images and the cast vote record, so that anybody who wants to, a candidate's campaign, especially those that might lose by just a few, the media, university, academia, Audit USA, anybody, political parties, anybody who wants to compare those ballot images with the cast vote record can do so. And there's programs available. In fact, there's software for other companies that are used in other states around the country where you can take the ballot images that may have gone through a Dominion system in Maricopa County or ESNS system in 13 of Arizona's 15 counties. And then Yavapai uses a company called Unison. No matter which system captured those ballot images, if you have the ballot images and the cast vote record, you can retabulate using a fourth company. Clear Ballot is one that's used in Maryland, for example. With this transparency, with the ballot images and the cast vote record, anybody can verify that the election was done correctly and everything is transparent. Somebody who lost it, and I'll just use kind of the most high profile one this last election. Carrie Lake cannot wrap her head around the fact that she lost in the election. She can't get to the ballots to show so that she could find out and go to a judge somewhere and try to prove how she lost. But if these ballot images were available, she could see the 120,000 ballots, and that's about what it was, where a voter voted for example, Republican Kimberly Yee, who ran for state treasurer successfully and won, but didn't vote for Carrie Lake, Republican running for governor. And if you look at the cast vote records, which are another report that's produced by or if you look at the statement of votes cast, I'm sorry, that the counties issue, and the statements of votes cast is also a document that comes from that cast vote record, but it does so in total numbers. You can clearly see that Kimberly Yee, Republican running for state treasurer, got 120,000 more votes than the Republican nominee, Carrie Lake, running for governor. And that's how that essentially explains that Carrie Lake lost the governor's race by 17,000. If she had gotten as many votes as Kimberly Yee had received, she would have won the governor's race. But for whatever reason, the voters selected Kimberly Yee for state treasurer, did not select Carrie Lake for governor. And if people believe that something happened, either inadvertently or intentionally, to manipulate those results, it's the ballot images and the cast vote record being made available to the public that will provide complete transparency to verify that our elections were done correctly. So I have another election bill that was over in the House. They made some changes. I'm going to take that bill to what's called a conference committee, probably happen next Monday or Tuesday. I'm going to the things in that bill were not nearly as important as this. And so we will drop the voter lists that I think were concerning people, and we'll just put the anonymous ballot images and the cast vote record in this new bill to make those public records and require that the counties provide that information within just a few days. And they already collect that information. We're not asking them to do anything that they don't already do. Simply transmit that data to the Secretary of State's office, who will make it available in a secure portal so that anybody who verifies that they will only use it for election purposes, and that's the only thing you could use it for anyway. It won't be the voter list that you might want to use for a mailing list for your newest magazine or anything. That will be out of the bill. So I will stop there. I'm not sure if I missed a cue or something from the folks running the Zoom meeting tonight, but I hope that explains why I believe, and it's not just me. I was very honored that Nikki Fried, the chairwoman of the Florida Democrat Party, sent a letter encouraging the support of the bill. Douglas Kellner, a commissioner of elections in New York, supported this idea. It's interesting that Democrats in many of our 50 states are advocating and being opposed by Republicans for the same thing that apparently Governor Hobbs felt that a Republican was sponsoring a bill and a lot of Democrats weren't in favor of it yet. But with the efforts of Audit USA, with the efforts of Mimi, these others, we had Benny Smith, election commissioner from Tennessee, Democrat, weighed in. This is exactly the kind of transparency that is making elections in other states trackable and publicly verifiable. And it will do the same thing in Arizona. And I think, in fact, if we do it, requiring all counties to do it. Right now, you've got pockets in some states that are doing this and many that are not. If Arizona can lead the way in saying that we're going to make ballot images and the cast vote record spreadsheet where those votes are tabulated, public records, then we can verify our elections once and for all. And we can tell people they really lost or won.
Just quickly, Ken, did Fontes have anything to tell you that he wanted you to say?
Yes, I'm sorry I forgot to mention that. We were hoping to have a surprise special guest to kind of wrap things up tonight. I spoke with Adrian Fontes, the Democrat Secretary of State. I served as a Republican Secretary of State. We may have things that we differ on other policies, but transparency in our elections is exactly we are both 1,000% committed to that. I asked Adrian today if he would be able to come on for just a few minutes to wrap this up and be our special guest. He was very apologetic and said that he was just going into a meeting that would not wrap up until about 8:30 tonight. But he wanted me to convey to everyone present or watching tonight that he is in total support of what will be Senate Bill 1518, 1518, will be the new bill number. 2560 was vetoed. We don't have the votes to override a veto. Plus, I think we can alleviate some of the concerns that Mimi and Bill and others mentioned about the voter lists being in there with the ballot images and the cast vote record. The changes we will make to 1518 will be just the ballot images and the cast vote record. And Adrian wanted me to convey to all of you that he is in 100% support of that. Thanks, John.
Thank you, Ken.
Is Ken going to hang around?
Yes.
Questions?
Yeah, you bet he is.
Thank you.
So, in fact, I guess we're getting ready to go to that part right now, and that's why the screen is set up. So,
John, do you want to bring Bill back up on camera?
yes, we do. Bill, you got your mic on? Okay, this
As
is
we're
test.
seeing, there we go.
Okay, I got him on.
I think this.
Okay. You want to ask people want questions who they are? Please announce. This gentleman over here wants your name first and And then you hit the other microphone, right?
Are we listening to a question? I can't hear it yet.
No, we're getting it on right now. We can go over here. All right. And it's on. Yeah, good.
Can you hear me, Ken?
Now I can, yes.
Good. My name is Tim Locks. I have three questions for you. Hopefully
Okay.
we can get through real quick. The first one you can probably explain last. Would you be kind enough to explain SCR 1037? Is this in effect now, or is it something that's going to be a ballot measure? That's the first question. Second question was, why was Jovan Pulitzer not allowed to speak to defend his audit on the 2020 election? And the third question was, it is my understanding that there are still 140,000 ballots that were never counted in the 2020 election. I understand that you were at that time a liaison between the legislature and
I think we should probably keep the questions germane to the ballot.
That's it.
Well, let me address those three questions quickly, Tim. SCR 1037 was a resolution. It is not binding. It does not have the effect of law. It did pass the House and the Senate, obviously with Republican votes probably exclusively, to say that we don't want to use machines anymore. But that does not have the effect of law. Unfortunately, one of our Republican leaders in the Senate sent out a letter to all the county election folks saying that because of that resolution, that machines could not be used in any elections going forward in Arizona. That is not true. The counties and the other statutes that are still on the books, the counties can and will follow those, which allows them to use the machines. We do have hand count audits that will also be used to verify that those machines counted batches of ballots accurately. But SCR 1037 and the letter that Borelli sent out saying we can't use machines anymore in Arizona was, I'm sorry, misinformation. And machines will be used in the 2024 election. As to why Jovan Pulitzer was not allowed to speak in September 2021 report to the Senate, I've never met Jovan, and it was not my decision. That must have been a decision between the Senate and between Doug Logan, the CEO of Cyber Ninjas, as to why Jovan's part of what he did in the paper analysis and some of those things was not part of the presentation that was given to the Senate on September 24th. But that was not a decision that I made. And I can't answer whether there are 140,000 ballots that weren't counted or not. But I can tell you that we hand counted the paper ballots at those machines at those tables with the Lazy Susan turntable things. And the fundamental statement that Cyber Ninjas put in their report from the audit was that they accounted for 2,089,569 ballots, paper ballots. That was within 994 total ballots of what Maricopa County said had been run through the election. Maricopa County said there was 2,089,563 ballots. And the Cyber Ninjas said that they accounted for within 994 of that number. So very close, within 1,000 of almost 2.1 million ballots. The second statement that they made, or the most important statement they made, and they said that, not me, was that the votes in the presidential race in the 2020 Maricopa County election between Trump and Biden, they came up within 350 votes of what Maricopa County had said in the official election results the previous November. And Cyber Ninjas said that Joe Biden didn't win Maricopa County by 40,000. He won by 40,350. And so the 350 variation that Cyber Ninjas verified in the votes on those almost 2.1 million ballots was actually slightly in Biden's favor. So But that fundamental statement got lost because there were lots of other things that they alleged. There might have been hundreds of people who had already died that voted, and people that moved and were the correct number of ballots counted and all of those things. So, but your point, your question, your third question about whether 140,000 ballots didn't get counted would be verifiable if this bill with this concept passes, because the counties file a statement of votes cast as part of the official canvass of an election. And it says, we had 1 million, whatever, voters vote. There should be the exact number of ballots, ballot images released should match the number of voters that voted. And that would help to verify in any election whether 100 ballots were missing or 140,000 ballots were missing. Of the 78 concerns that Cyber Ninjas put in their report, Maricopa County did admit that the Cyber Ninjas found one error that Maricopa County admitted to, and that was that they had counted a batch of 50 ballots twice, and they admitted that. But if, as you have heard, that it was 140,000, we didn't find that when we counted the paper ballots. We came within 994 total ballots accounted for from what the county said, 2,089,000 and whatever. And of the votes on those 2 million ballots, we came within 350. But your question perfectly illustrates the kinds of concerns that can be addressed with ballot images and cast vote records released together. Thank you for those questions.
My name's Lauren McElroy. I came tonight because Bill Risner is one of my heroes. I've watched you since the late 70s in Pima County fight against corruption. I'm glad you think that ballot images is going to help, but I just think I want the paper ballots too. I want to have a triangular verification. I mean, how many of us have ever deleted an image from our cameras? Come on. And I've been involved in the 2004 election, which, in reaction to what happened in 2000, we thought, okay, this time it's going to get counted right. And it did not. I'm really concerned about things that happened. If you listen to the Board of Supervisors meeting in Maricopa County in 2022, all the people who said, I tried to vote and I wasn't able to. I mean, this whole thing about a printer that doesn't work on the day of an election is just, for someone who voted for many decades, where number one, the precinct system, why has that been gotten rid of, where you had people coming in and signing in the place where they live, and there's an accountability of who voted that way. And then another thing I think that has been used to muddle the waters is mail-in votes. That just, you put a thing in the post and who knows where the hell it goes. So anyway, why have these things been done away with? Why do you think that images by themselves without paper ballots is not something that can be messed with easily?
Because we're going to I need to jump in here real quick. Okay.
We have another bill backing this one up. It's what the ballot library. Oh, is it? I'm sorry, picture here. Okay. Is that we have another, you make a bill, you do it in small portions. Okay. You build a foundation. That's what we're doing. But our intention is to have a situation, a lady like her, we want you to go to the ballot library. We want you to take your image and after you add everything up and say, I still don't believe it. And I want to go with you. I want us to go look up images and find out, because I'll say this, these machines do not count the original ballot. They take a picture, but they're married together. And that's good. And that creates redundancy.
Yeah.
John?
Yes? Yes.
I'd like to, Lauren asked a wonderful question, and I want to remind voters that both in the bill that was vetoed and the bill coming back with just the ballot images and the cast vote record, there's a paragraph, Lauren, that specifically says the counties shall maintain the original paper ballots in a easily retrievable format. That is the foundation that John is talking about, so that if we can get ballot images and the cast vote record to be public documents this year, and if the counties keep the original paper ballots in an easily retrievable format, and they do, there's a report that any of these election management systems that tells you any batch is going to be, a particular batch of 100, some counties do it at 100 ballots in a batch. Some counties do 200, some do 50. But as batches of ballots are run through, and we know that those are ballots numbers 651 through 699, they can tell you that that's in box 500 and it's 2 inches from the top or 3 inches from the bottom, or it's so far left to right, or you can tell where they're at. They're retrievable. So the next step, and this will be next year or the year after, is after you have the ballot images and the cast vote record, and you can verify that all of the votes on those ballot images were correctly tabulated in the cast vote record, just what you're asking for will be one of our next steps. Now you can say, okay, I want the county to make sure that, and you can pick 10 random or 100 random, or we'll figure out some mechanism for people to say, now I want the county to show me the paper ballots, make sure that they match the ballot images that they were supposed to have been made from, so that there wasn't any hanky-panky in the capturing of those ballot images from the paper original ballots.
I just want to say I've been advocating for that a long time, that there would be a printed ID number on the ballot image and on the ballot. So ballot image 1167 matches paper ballot 1167. It involves printing a number on the ballot. I mean, it's a ways down but that is my advocacy, and John calls it a ballot library, and the image and the paper ballot are married by a matching ID number. I have been concerned that any digital file can be messed with, and so I understand your concern that you said, why do you think images are going to be any better than anything else? Because it's a step towards transparency and redundancy, and it also makes cheating very, very difficult. If you were going to change a ballot image and then go find the ballots just enough to swing an election in the paper ballot file and change those all out, and the cast vote record, no. So that's why this is an elegant solution for people, and it will involve keeping the paper ballots and going there as a probably a random risk limiting audit, some sort of thing. So those ballot images have not been messed with. Thanks.
Not hearing you.
Okay, start again. Is that it? Yeah, it'll work. Thank you. Hi, Ted Downing. Okay, a voice out of the Pleistocene. I have a question. First, I want to thank Ken, the wonderful work for years, Bill, all of you, and especially those in the room that have been working very hard to get this, what turned into a veto. My question concerns a process now, and maybe Ken can help us. He said that 1518 will now go through a conference committee. I wonder if there's two parts of my question for everybody. I wonder if you could explain what happens in the conference committee and what we expect, and will that go back to both the Senate and the House? And in that case, and this is a question for Bill and for Mimi, in that case,
What could those of us that have been fighting for so hard now, was it been 18 years? I don't know if it's 19 years. Yeah, since I was in the legislature. But those of us that are fighting, what can we do to kind of push this along from the outside so we can make certain that we don't face another veto? And part of that would be, is Ken, do you have some Democrats that have assured you that if it's changed, they'll be with us on this time in the Senate and the House?
Ted, to your question, let me describe for everyone's understanding. After a bill goes from one house to the other, House to Senate or Senate to House, if there are changes made in that second body, and those changes are not agreed to when it comes back to the first body, then you can go to what's called a conference committee to work out those differences and make them identical so that then they go back to both houses and get voted on one last time. I had a bill, 1518, that passed the Senate, passed the House, but they made some changes. And when 2560 got vetoed, I have decided, and I have informed both the House, the Senate, and the governor's office that I'm going to be taking out the voter lists from 2560, just putting the ballot images and the cast vote record on 1518. I had a face-to-face meeting with the governor's chief of staff and her top two legislative liaisons today to explain how this will address the concerns of reverse engineering and somehow figuring out how a particular voter voted by having the voter list as part of the bill. So we will drop the voter lists and just have the ballot images and the cast vote record in this new bill, 1518. And what you can do is contact your legislators, or there's a system at the state legislative warehouse, on the website where you can write one or all 90 legislators and tell them this is happening on 1518 and please support it. Now that's going to happen pretty quickly. That's probably going to happen Monday or Tuesday of next week. So I'm working hard to make sure that we're doing something the governor understands, addresses the concerns as to why she vetoed it, and that we hopefully will get a signature on 1518 with just the two pieces, the ballot images and the cast vote records.
Hi,
Nothing's ever dead at the legislature.
Hi, my name is Derby, and I think this is maybe for Ken. My curiosity is what can be done to put voters' minds at ease about allegations of deceased people voting? Like, are my great-great-great-grandchildren going to be voting for me, or is there some way to wipe that out once I've passed on?
Okay. Well, first of all of the death records that occur within the state of Arizona go to what's called the Department of Vital Records. They are required by state statute to periodically, and I think it happens weekly, notify the Secretary of State's office of who has died in Arizona. Secretary of State's office is required by state statute to then send that data to the 15 counties who are required by state statute to update their voter record, original voter records, and remove those voters from the voter rolls at the county level. Even though we're taking out the voter lists from the bill, which I think means we can get a signature on the ballot images and the cast vote record bill in 1518. As we've alluded to a couple times, voter lists, who was registered and whether they voted in the last election, is already a public document under state statute. And it's required by state statute that those voter lists, with what's called their voter history, the voter's voter history. So for example, I can get and I did this when my father passed away in 2017, I think it was. I got a list of voters in 2018 and made sure that his name was not on that list anymore. And so even though it won't be part of this bill, it is an important part of keeping our voter records clean to make sure that candidates or political parties or interested organizations like Audit USA or you as an individual have access to the voter rolls. You can't use them for commercial purposes. That's not allowed under state law. But anybody who gets, if you went to the Pima Republican, Libertarian, and Democrat parties, I'll bet they both have a voter list of all voters in Pima County within the last 90 days. And you could verify that somebody that died a year or two ago or whenever is not on that list.
Oh, I have a follow-up question on that also. Okay, I'm a data guy and I do data analysis. If I was to get a list of every voter in Pima County and sort by age, would I find any anomalies? Would I find anybody over 100, 150?
I hope not, but I believe that that's exactly the kinds of transparency and public verifiability that we need in our elections. And that's why, as part of the reason why we had included the voter list as part of the first bill, because the four of them, if you have a list of who is eligible, you have a list of who voted, you can see that everybody on the who voted list was on the eligible to vote list. If you have the ballot images and you have the same number of ballot images as the number of people who were on the voted list, and then you have the spreadsheet on which the votes from those ballot images were all tabulated, you can now see, as those three questions I mentioned earlier, there's nobody voting who shouldn't have been eligible. We have the same number of ballot images as we have voters in this election. And we have the spreadsheet that shows that all the votes were tabulated correctly. But that kind of data analysis by people like you, Derby, who have that capability, should precisely be part of what citizens who conduct our elections, as Bill said. The government only facilitates these elections at our authorization. And we need to have that level of transparency. When I was Secretary of State, just to give you, we did things like that because we had data people like you. In my first statewide election, I had the data guys at the Secretary of State's office run the voted list for people who voted from the same address. And we had an address in Maricopa County that came back with 491 people voting at the same address. We thought we had uncovered a massive fraud of some type of a voter ballot harvesting something or whatever. We drove out to that address and found out that it was a retirement home. And there were 643 people that lived there and 491 of them had voted. So it was legitimate. But whether you're checking the number of voters at an address, the number of voters by name, the number of voters by age, the number of voters in a precinct, as John mentioned, you could sort these ballot images down to the precinct level. And you could look at, I know how many voters there are in the Watson precinct up here in Yavapai County. There shouldn't be more people voting from the Watson precinct than are registered there in the first place. And that's the kind of detail analysis that people with your capabilities and many others could do if we make our elections transparent.
I just want to add to that. Thank you, Ken. As a citizen, I have gotten voter histories I was asked for as part of a data analysis, and it was available to me. I had to pay for it, and I got it on a CD, and we were looking for people and whether they'd voted by mail or they'd voted at the polls. That's all data that was kept by LA County, and I, as a citizen, could go and use it as part of an election protection strategy that we were pursuing at the time.
We don't have sound.
Okay, I'll try again. I'm Millie Ryan. I've worked the polls a few times. I recently changed my party affiliation and became a libertarian. And I was told that I cannot be an inspector at the polls because of the party. And I read through all of the material from the policy and procedures on election poll workers, and it talks about the two main parties. It talks about the three main parties, but then it talks about the two main parties, just Democrat and Republican, at a polling place. And I'm not sure I'm clear on why not. I understand we have a judge of the same party and judge of opposing party. And if I go in as a libertarian, I would think that the judges would, if I had a libertarian, is one of the same, and a Democrat or a Republican could be the judge of the opposing. And I know that they need more poll workers and they need younger ones. And we're cutting out a lot of people by not having libertarians participating. So I just wondered why that is.
Millie, I believe somebody told you that in error, or if it's not an error, I will fix that in state statute next year. Because everything, I mean, I was Secretary of State for 6 years. I oversaw 3 election procedure manuals, they're called EPMs, that were done in the odd years, 9, 11, and 13. And in all of the statutes I've ever read and the election procedures that I've overseen as Secretary of State, party not designated, some people call it independence, but party, if you're not Republican or Democrat, a person registered as party not designated or green or libertarian should fulfill the requirement of filling a position wherever you wanted to serve in a precinct or a voting center as a person from different parties. For example, 24 hours after the machines count the ballots, the counties are required to have a hand count audit, and they take randomly selected batches of the actual paper ballots and hand them to 2 people from 2 different parties sitting at tables who count them by hand and verify that the machine count was correct. That can be a Republican and an independent. It can be a Democrat and a libertarian. It can be a libertarian and an independent, as long as they're not 2 of the same party. So I believe somebody told you something in error.
That told me, the person that actually told me that, I'm participating in a group that is getting feedback from poll workers with Pima County, and it's the lady who does the hiring of the poll workers. When I told her I changed, she told me that I would not be eligible to be anything other than a clerk at this point. So I was told by the lady that hires the poll workers.
Well, I'm gonna check it out tonight, Millie, or tomorrow. I'll be back at the Senate tomorrow. I'm up at my home in Prescott, but I'll be down at the Senate, and I'm gonna check whether our attorneys agree with her interpretation or mine, because I believe you should be allowed as a libertarian to serve in any of the roles, as long as when it comes down to 1 or 2 of you doing something together, it's not another person of the same party.
Any other questions? One more. Peter.
All right. All right, thanks, you guys. So yeah, my name is Peter Norquist, and my question is to anyone. Okay, my question is to anyone who would like to weigh in on this. I am just curious, since a big part of this bill that is under discussion is about the ballot images. What is the chain of custody of the ballot images from beginning to end? So I assume that they begin on the machines that the ballots are fed into. And from that point, what happens to them? Do they ever get duplicated? Do they go onto another server? Do they get centralized? Do they go into the cloud? And if they go to different different hosts, how are they transferred? Are they transferred electronically through a flash drive? And where do they finally end up? That's my question. So thanks to anyone who can answer that.
John, do you want to try that, or you want me to?
I can, is it working? Okay, let me next to Bill, my buddy. They don't leave the offices of the counties. They stay there in their major computer until after the canvas, they click a mouse and they make a copy and they send it off to the Secretary of State's office. Okay. But before they do, if you're in Maricopa, we want 741 precincts. If you're in Pima, we want the whole state to break them down to precincts where anybody could handle it. Okay. Nobody has a computer that I know of, at least that I know, that can handle 2.1 million images. I've done as much as 1,000,001 in it, and I got a very powerful computer. It doesn't handle it. We want people to think locally, okay? And then maybe act globally to defend our democracy. And so we believe that this system is really going to change things because, you know, in the 2020 election, just to say this, 80 million people didn't vote, even though a lot of people claimed there was more people who voted than were citizens in this country. No, it wasn't true, okay? They're only giving you registered numbers. But getting back to the question that you asked, it will be
John, talk about hashing. John, talk about hashing those images.
Absolutely. The images, when they're made, as they go through, they have the numbers. And it goes ahead and it says this ballot has this much of a value. If somebody gets the image and tries to change it, it would change the values. And plus you got the original ballot to go back to. And so that's where the safety comes down right there. So anyway.
Yeah, in Maricopa County, at least, the contract with Dominion is public, and then the county recorder's office, the election department, also the county, put out a document that's about 94 pages called Setting the Record Straight, and they explain what they do in there. And the main thing is that the election computers aren't connected to anybody else. When they get part of it, they hashtag that, they add it to the other part. They got a whole process that they describe. And you can look at it and see if you think it's a solid process or not.
The only thing I would add to Peter's question, I was the person who was responsible for receiving the all of the data that the Senate had subpoenaed from Maricopa County, including all of the machines and the hard drives and the big black boxes. And what we received from Maricopa County would seem to indicate that they had the kind of the mainframe computer. It was a big black box about the size of I don't know how to describe it, but it had to be 2 foot by 1.5 feet and 6 inches deep. But they also included 6, if I remember correctly, big hard drives. They were orange at the ends. And it looked to me like they had made copies. John's right. They had them in their possession, but they had made several copies, but each copy should have had hashed images that were identical to the same hashed images that would have been on the other copies. But they, about 15 years ago, when I was Secretary of State, the State Library and Public Archives Agency, which was part of the Secretary of State's office, decided to change policies in the state of Arizona. And they went from trying to keep original documents on one forever type medium to, they came up with a new, I think I can remember it, LOCKS, LOCKS, lots LOCSS, LOCS, LOCKS. lots of copies keep stuff safe or something. And so there was a change several years ago. Instead of having, something original only on one and only one thing, we kind of started this idea of, we can make several copies in case something happens. We'll keep one here and one there. So to me, it comforts me that there might be multiple copies of all of those ballot images, and tiny Santa Cruz or Greenlee County might transfer it from one place to another differently than Maricopa does it. And some of them might use the cloud, I hope, because there's redundancy and all kinds of protections there. I don't think we specify in state statute down to that detail, but your question addresses a very important issue, and that is, how do we keep stuff? How do we keep original records and the original ballot images and things like that, while we're also talking about making copies of those ballot images and the cast vote record available to the entire public?
John, I've got a clip from the ballot image broadcast that was done on Smart Elections about hashes. It's a minute and 54 seconds. Is that something that would be good to play?
Why not?
Okay, here we go then. Let me take.
A hash, for people who aren't familiar with this, is a security measure that lets you know if a document or a batch of documents has been changed in any way. And those digital ballot images need to be hashed immediately upon creation in the machine. And then if you go and redact them, you have lost the ability to have the hash be meaningful. And this is a comment that Bruce Cord put up previously. I am a photographer and use Photoshop. I can doctor a ballot image so that you cannot tell it has been doctored, meaning it's not proof of vote.
I believe if you do that, you'll change the hash code on that ballot image.
And it won't match the cast vote record either, because that happens when the ballot is scanned. So you have to get a hold to the image and do that afterwards, which means you'll fail the first line of defense because you won't even match the cast vote record.
In order to change the ballot images, you also have to change the vote totals. So if someone can change the vote totals, wouldn't you rather have the ballot images to look at rather than nothing to look at? We're not trying to eliminate other kinds of audits. This is in addition to audits.
In the statute, do they have to hash the digital ballot images? I know it's one of my concerns because I don't know that the general public understands the hashes, or even if the election commissioners necessarily understand them. And it's important for them to understand how critical that is to maintaining the whole chain of custody of the digital ballot images, that they can be hashed in a way that guarantees this is what all of them look like, and if they get changed, we will know. So I know that's something that I think is very important. Benny, you wanted to weigh in on that, and I'm going to give you the last word.
It happens automatically, but making it a part of the public chain probably would put a little more teeth in it.
Put it into the statute, you're saying?
It would have more teeth with it being declared that it has to have that. So any competing software or hardware would then have to.
Okay, we're back now.
Okay, are there any other questions in-house? Seeing none, are there any questions that we received via the internet that we can read? Hearing none, okay.
Drew's gonna close this out.
I would like to go ahead and introduce us to the chairwoman of the Pima County Libertarian Party, whose house we are in, Ms. Drew Heaton.
Thank you. As it was said, my name is Drew Heaton. I'm the chairman here in Pima County, and I just want you to know that I'm so honored to have John, Bill, and Brandon here in the house. I have really admired Bill and John when I started learning about the elections and what they've done to protect our elections and to fight for transparency for many, many years now. So thank you. Thank you for being here. I also want you to know that it's an honor for me to have each and every one of you individually here. And it means a lot to me because as someone in my community who sees hatred coming from each side, I see, it doesn't matter if I'm in a room of right or left. they will say things like the partisan divide is killing America. And I believe that that is true. But right here in this room right now, I want you to think about what's happening right now. My friends on both the right and the left have come together peacefully. You know, if there's anyone that can stand up and say, I disagree with you, but I can live peaceably with you, it's the libertarian. And that message is what we want to continually spread. And I promise you, as the chairwoman here in this community, that you are welcome here in this house, no matter what your party affiliation is. I don't tell anybody, no, it's being recorded, so people are going to know. I have at times convinced people to stay Democrat, to stay Republican, exert influence where you are. And remember that what we want to do is bring people together. And I really appreciate all the hard work that both John, Bill, and including Brandon have done towards this issue. Thank you. So I just want you to know that this is about bringing a community together. We must in our community learn to disagree and work on issues that we agree on. And this is definitely an issue that we agree on. So thank you for coming here. I hope that you will return. Thanks.
With that, I thank everybody for being here and have a good night. And let's make a better America by making elections transparent, trackable, publicly verified, with a redundant system, with a ballot library to verify, and a solid chain of custody. That's what we want. We want to go back to what Bill talked about. You know, one thing he didn't say, I wish he had, because, you know, I'm into chain of custody. You know, I want to know where that thing was and where it went. And, you know, he was telling me, 1912s in that era, that people could watch. And then they would punch a hole in the ballot and then put it on a straight chain. That way, no way could get back in there. He told me that he found stories where somebody would try to sneak an extra ballot in, see, and they'd fold it up, put it real tight. Guess what? The fool who did that lost his vote, and the vote he tried to stuff because they threw it out. And the public was there to see it. We're not going to go back to those times, except the way we're going to take you, digitally. With a library to go back. Results, when you get them, we want them by precinct. They're small enough to handle. The cast vote record is no good without the images. It's a spreadsheet, okay? Anybody knows a spreadsheet, you can do what you want on it. But with the links to the images, we could verify, and maybe we could move this country forward again and be the we. I'm sorry I haven't got my button on. I didn't have time. I usually wear a be a we button. And you know, when I first got into this thing, I was highly partisan. And I met great people in the Libertarian Party, people like Ken Bennett, who, you know, just a remarkable human being. I mean, we bonded because we were in the same foxhole fighting grifters. And it was quite an experience. But anyway, thank you all. And thank you, Drew. Ted Downing, wow, this is a guy I go back a long way with. We fought a lot, but I was under him, and he was the chair of the Democratic Party's election integrity, and I was his lieutenant. Anyway, thank you, and good night, everybody. And thank you all.